Thank you for tuning in to WDRB Media, the voice of the community. The only station giving you double the information and inspiration. You're listening to the Perky Collar radio show, and I'm your host, David M. Frankel. First of all, Happy New Year. This is our second show of the new year, and I want to take some time, since it's a new year, to give you a little more information about myself, my family, my business, some of the things I'm doing here in the Charlotte, North Carolina area to give back, to help the next generation of youth that are also interested in entrepreneurship or just interested in business in general, and give you a little bit more of a full 360 view of myself, which is not easy. I think a lot of you can identify that to be transparent and to open your life up to social media and YouTube and Facebook is not easy. But overall, I'm a pretty open book, and I want you to get to know where I come from and what's inspired me to be who I am. So first off, I grew up in the Cincinnati area. I'm one of two kids. And my brother lives in Chicago. Both my parents lived in Cincinnati. I grew up in the Cincinnati area as well. Unfortunately, both of them are deceased at this point. But I live here in Charlotte with my family. We have my wife, Bridget, and we have 6 children, ranging from 4 years old all the way up to 21 years old. So as far as people that know the education system, I have a child in preschool, one in elementary, one in middle school, 2 in high school, and 1 in college. So I feel like we have our ear to the ground of how education is running, and they're all good students. They're all good athletes as well. But it definitely is a challenge to have 6 kids and be an entrepreneur, to say the least. So from there, I guess the challenging part is, what have I done up until this point? What have I done in the past? What was my career moves? What's my background? So again, growing up in Cincinnati, went to Indian Hill High School, graduated, went to University of South Carolina, which is why I have my Gamecock hat here today in celebration of their big Outback Bowl win against Michigan on New Year's Day. So congratulations to the Gamecock fans that are out there. I graduated with a business degree, started out in pharmacy. So I think in life sometimes you think you want to go one direction. I wanted to go into medical research. Had a great-grandfather that was a pediatrician for many, many years, and felt that was my path of research, and finding cures of diseases was my passion. And then once I got to pharmacy school at University of South Carolina after 2 years, my GPA was 3.6, and I didn't think it was sufficient enough to get into the pharmacy program. And after taking organic chemistry twice, with obviously the first time not getting a C, and you have to get a B or better to move on. So I took it again and got a C again. So I kind of realized that organic chemistry and the science world wasn't going to be my thing. So I switched over to business, got a 4.0 the rest of the way, graduated in 4.5 years. Not bad considering 2 years was spent in the pharmacy program. From there, I worked over the summers with a company called Growing Family Portraits, where we did in-home child photography. And what that basically entailed was part of the company sending a photographer to the household to photograph a newborn baby, typically 3 weeks old, 4 weeks old, that first picture outside the hospital, professional photograph, I should say. And then I myself would go back in the household to show the photographs to people. We did what's called romancing photographs, which is basically helping people see the future when the child goes to kindergarten, goes to maybe high school, goes to college, gets married, has their own children. Those are different milestones in which photographs become a lot more valuable. A photograph initially is just a rectangle. It doesn't have any meaning or any value to you. But as time goes on, those photographs become very special. Those that have fires, those that have death in the family know exactly what I'm talking about, how valuable those photographs become. So for 12 years, I spent going into homes and sharing the miracle of life with people. And I enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun. Unfortunately, in the 80s and early 90s, the photography world changed. Everything came out with the cell phone became very popular. Therefore, cameras were on phones, and I saw the industry kind of sliding away from the professional world. There's obviously still wedding photographers out there, and bar mitzvahs and bat mitzvahs, and other special formal occasions. But in general, the photography world is now based on your phone, on your camera. So I started seeing a less and less demand or need for the in-home photography world. So even after 12 years and my passion, I loved it. I got away from that. And to kind of go back for a second, what got me into enjoying photography, I took photography in college at University of South Carolina. My grandfather had a camera store called Ace Camera in Cincinnati, Ohio. So both my mother and my aunt and my grandfather grew up in the camera space. So being that I was in the photography world, felt very comfortable for me as well. My passion was still medical research. But obviously after the medical research avenue kind of died out, I decided to shift over to business. And my grandfather, who was in corporate real estate in Cincinnati, he encouraged me to use my personality, and that pharmacy would be boring, and I was better served in the business community. So Again, didn't take a whole lot of convincing. I guess I agree with him that it was hard to support a family with medical research as my career. He said, you can always give money to medical research. So go to business, kick some butt, and give money back. So that's kind of my path after I decided to change my major. So I did that up until college. Once I left college, I then went to open my own office in Atlanta, Georgia. I was the youngest general manager of any city throughout the country. Atlanta, it lasted about 2 years. I took the office to number one in the country, which is great, which is typical of new offices. There's a lot of excitement, a lot of newness of the city. Atlanta's a very young town, and we thrived. We did very well. I built a great staff. Unfortunately, at one point in that 2-year term, towards the end of that 2-year term, my grandfather fell ill in Cincinnati. I felt it was important for me to go back home and be there for him. So we had an opportunity to go back and try and resurrect an office in Cincinnati, Ohio, that had been around for 17 years, to do what I did in Atlanta in the Cincinnati market. And to some extent, I was going home as well. Not for a long period of time. I told him I'd give him a couple of years. I really liked the Southeast area. I wanted to go back. So I did go back to Cincinnati. Unfortunately, while I was gone, the Atlanta office closed due to leads drying up and some other issues outside of my control and the company's control. The Cincinnati office, I spent 6 years there trying to rebuild that staff, rebuild the market, brought it up from number 17, 18 amongst 20-some offices up to number 5. I could never really crack that top 3 mark, but I was proud of the experience I was given. I was also still the youngest manager in the country, and we were just being passionate, helping people understand the value of photography. And the mission is the vision was one of my favorite phrases, because the goal was to help a mother or help a father or a grandparents understand what the power of the photograph in the future, to help them visualize getting those photographs out down the road, because that's when they're most valuable. From there, I said, okay, I've been here 6 years. It's time for me to go back down south. He said, well, Atlanta's been closed, but how about Charlotte? And that's when we decided to make Charlotte our home. And that was 13 years ago. So we're now in 2018, believe it or not. So you're talking 2005. I brought my whole family back to Charlotte. By that point, we had, 2005, I guess it was 3 kids. So we were halfway finished. And so that was an adventure, moving our family from Columbia, South Carolina to Atlanta, then to Cincinnati, and then to Charlotte. And Charlotte's, like I said, been our home for 13 years. And then when I got here, with the best of intentions, we tried to make the photography world a success. Leads kind of got funky a little bit for us, and we didn't have the distribution of quality leads like we were hoping for. And I ended up leaving the company I worked for 12 years, about 6 months, 9 months after I got here. So from there, I jumped around a little bit, trying to find the next best fit. When you're doing something for 12 years, it's hard to jump into something else that you're as passionate about. I probably should have taken a little more time before I jumped ship. But I got into the activity club for singles world, which is always very interesting. I was interviewing a lot of nurses, a lot of doctors, attorneys that just didn't have time to date. And now my job was to screen through them and help them get into an activity club for singles, where they're not so focused on finding a matchmaker or finding a person to marry, but instead to find someone that had similar interests. So they did bowling, they did skydiving, they did movie nights, they had wine tastings, all kinds of cool things. John Beaver was my boss. He was from Florida. He was starting up his own first events and adventures here in the Charlotte market. Due to bonds that are required in North Carolina that aren't required in South Carolina, after about 2 years, that also went south, unfortunately. Literally, he moved back down south. And from there, I kind of just wasn't sure what to do. I spent some time with Red Ventures here in Charlotte, which is a big marketing company. Spent about 2 years there. I knew it was kind of just an in-between job. I couldn't sit on the phone and be tied to a kiosk for very long. And let's see, before that, I think before that, before I went to Red Ventures, I went to a company called Playmore Design Corp. And that's owned by Scott Swimmer and their family here in Charlotte. It was a commercial playground manufacturer. So I was able to design, build, and create really exciting commercial playgrounds for kids in this area and also nationwide. We did some with Samaritan Purse that were outside the country playgrounds. But it was exciting to create new products. Learned a lot about the playground industry. I had to be a certified playground inspector just so I could understand how to plan out these playgrounds, and I can inspect playgrounds to make sure they're safe for the kids. My kids will never be the same, because now my kids can play in a playground, I have to walk around there like, Dad, please, can we just play in the playground? I'm like, no, I got to check for head entrapments and entanglements. I got to make sure you guys are safe. So they rolled their eyes, as all kids would, but I want to make sure they were safe. And if you don't know, there are playground rules. Please Google playground rules. I think it's CPSC. Anyway, just Google playground safety, and there's lots of rules to make sure the playground in your neighborhood is safe, since this does go beyond the Charlotte market. It's important that your kids are safe. So anyway, I did that for 7 years. The owner of the company decided to pursue a nonprofit called Drumstrong, which is a great cancer organization. His heart was in that, and I couldn't blame him. And he decided that my salary and commission wasn't as needed as his need to get into Drumstrong. So he decided to put his resources in that. I was left to try and find something new, and that's where I ended up at Red Ventures to kind of fill the gap there. And then after Red Ventures, I got into online marketing, and that's where I spent the last 5 years, not including since I started Perky. In those 5 years, I learned about Google, I learned about Facebook, I learned about all the social media components and how to drive customers to websites, how important social media is, how important content is, and just try to help business owners from all around the Charlotte area with their online space. And back then, you're talking 8 years ago, getting on the first page of Google was kind of the trend, and that was the key words everyone was looking to do. And the algorithms would keep changing. They had Panda updates and Penguin updates, and it was kind of that bullet they were all chasing. They just didn't know how to attain it. So I enjoyed that knowledge, that training from web.com, Reach Local, so that when I decided to launch my own business in 2015, I was able to have that background on how to set up a website properly, how important e-commerce was, how important fresh content was on social media. So after 5 years of doing that, I needed to go into business for myself. I was tired of and I'm sure a lot of you can relate to that. You get tired of the monthly commission goals and expectations, and not that I didn't want to meet the expectations, but some weren't reasonable. Like from literally Thanksgiving through January, businesses don't want to talk to you. They're in holiday mode. They don't want to spend any money. They'll talk to you the first of the year, but the goals are still the same. And if you don't meet the goals in November, December, then you're put on performance plans for January and February. And just that whole concept just frustrates me when for sure, and you look at the history of the company, you've never done well in November, December, and expect people to do well and threaten them in January, it just didn't make a whole lot of sense. So February of 2015, I decided to move off and do my own thing and be my own boss and make my own threats to myself instead of having people threaten me instead. So, how did the Perky Collar evolve? Literally, I was getting ready for work one day while I was working for one of these online companies, and my collar was looking sloppy, even though it was right out of the dry cleaning bag. I put the shirt on, looked in the mirror, and the collar was drooping and sagging. I put a blazer on top, and that just magnified the problem. And at that point, I looked around the bathroom for a solution, like MacGyver would look around for a solution. Couldn't find anything to stick in my collar to make it look nicer. Instead, I tried putting on another shirt. The shirt had another shirt of a dry cleaning bag, had the same issue. Switched to another shirt. Same problem. I finally figured out the shirt wasn't going to solve itself, so I had to do something to the collar to make it fit better, or make it look better, I should say. So then I went into my 5-year-old daughter's bedroom at the time and looked around, again, like MacGyver, looking for clues. I found a basket full of headbands, and some of the headbands have flowers and butterflies and different things like that. That obviously wouldn't work because it's big and bulky. But I found some very sleek, simple headbands, and I stuck one. It was actually purple. Obviously, it's interesting and ironic that the company colors are now purple, white, and black. It has nothing to do with the color I found, but a lot of people ask that question. So I stuck that headband in my collar, and I looked in the mirror, and voila, my collar looked so much better. And I wore that headband in my collar for that meeting the entire day. And once the meeting was over, I did take the headband out, because it was not comfortable. Her little head at 5 years old was smaller than my neck. So it looked good. It didn't feel as great or as comfortable as I was hoping for. But after that meeting, it also hit me that since Inventus, which is the company I worked with here in Charlotte, partnered up with Playmore, that was the commercial playground manufacturer that I work with, they shared space in Uptown Charlotte, on Elliott Street. They're the first people I thought of when I had this, kind of aha moment, so to speak. So I called Ryan Gorman at Inventus and said, I have an idea for a collar support system, because no one's wearing ties anymore, or very few people wearing ties, and I think this would be a great solution for people that want to wear open collar but don't want to look sloppy. So I sat down with them. This is 2014, actually. I think it was April 2014. There was an engineer, a graphic designer, Ryan, who's VP, I think, of the company now. And we just sat down, and I brought in a bunch of other headbands I picked up at the dollar store, some headbands I got from home, and said, well, here's all the different types of headbands. and the different materials the headband's going to be made of, but I want it to be for the collar. So how can we take this foundation and make it worthy of the collar? So when we come back, I'll talk to you about the whole invention process and when I decided to start the company. And if you're thinking about starting a company, you're thinking about bringing a product to market, what's the first steps you should take? But that's a good summary of my last 15 years, kind of where I came from. I hope you understand and appreciate some of the things I've been through and can relate to some of those things. And we'll be right back. We'll talk more about the Perky Collar. Again, you're tuned into WDRB Media, the voice of the community, the only station giving you double the information and inspiration. We'll be right back after the break.